Welcome to the underground, you rebel scum. This is the American Expat, and today I have the privilege of sharing with you the Sony Alpha 7 Mark IV, the latest in the Sony Alpha 7 series of cameras. It comes with a 33 megapixel Exmor sensor tied to a BIONZ XR image processor. It comes with a 5-axis IBIS system image stabilization built into the camera. It can do 10 frames per second in burst mode. It can record in up to 60 frames per second at 4K. Of course, it crops in, as we'll show going through this camera. And I can't wait to get it out into the field and actually show what it's capable of doing, what its limitations are, how good it actually is. So let's grab a cup of coffee or whatever caffeinated or uncaffeinated beverage you happen to prefer, and we'll go see what this thing can do. Hey, thanks for sticking with us. So, I am out here in Little Cottonwood Canyon, and I'm dealing with changing lighting situations because there's clouds up above this mountain peak here that just keep coming in and blocking and unblocking the sun, so I apologize for that, but yeah, the lighting is kind of all over the place. Now, I'll let you know I'm going to be going on a bit of a trip to Europe, and I wanted to get this intro in before we head over to the airport and see if we can get a couple of the capabilities of the camera on film before actually hitting the airport and going out there. And then we'll just have some fun with the camera to see how well it does taking photos on the trip. Should be a lot of fun. But the first thing I wanted to check was the autofocus, because Sony is famous for autofocus. And, well, you know, this is like the a high-end Sony camera, or would you call it mid-range, something like that. Anyway, let's see what it can do. I'm going to walk away from the camera. It should stay focused on my face, and then I'll walk toward it. Oh no, I'm getting kind of... Okay, now I'm walking toward the camera. It can detect my face. It knows to stay focused on me, whether I'm way over here or over here. And it's pretty quick too. I've seen other cameras, they struggle. It starts, you know, breathing all over the place. But this thing seems to just know what to do. So am I too quick for it? If I get away, how long does it take? I think it's pretty good. An excellent camera for that. Let's face it, if you're filming yourself, that's kind of what you want to do. It's also useful when you're taking photos. I mean, rather than taking the time to move the knobs on the lens, you just click the button and it usually knows what it is you want to focus on, which is fantastic. There's different metering modes and that sort of thing, but you know, it does what it needs to do. It's an excellent camera for that, I think. You'll have to... Was I in focus? I think I was in focus. Now, let's try this. It's got burst mode on it where I can do 10 frames per second taking photos. And there's a lot of traffic going by behind me. I want to try and catch one of these cars with the burst mode and see how well it does. I'm going to up the frame rate, not the frame rate, but the shutter speed. And we'll see what this thing can do. Let's take a look here and see. Just look at that converted Sprinter van RV, captured in stunning detail. Now I'm driving back out of the canyon to test another feature of the camera over in Salt Lake City. We'll be trying out the S&Q mode to take a time lapse of driving around the city. Looks great, doesn't it? It also makes it look so much more fun than it actually was driving around in traffic. Okay, well now I'm back at the house to finish packing a couple of things before we go, but I wanted to show you guys what happens when you record in 4K at 60 frames per second. It crops in, it goes into crop sensor mode, if you want to call that, APS-C mode. You'll see exactly what I mean. I'm going to show you before 60 frames per second and what happens when you go into 60 frames per second. I also wanted to show you guys some of my personal favorite features of the camera, things that I find very handy. But let's do the whole 60 frames per second thing at 4K. I'll show you. Now you see, right now it's in regular 4K at 24 frames per second, And here we go. 60 frames per second at 4K. It looks like it zoomed in, but it actually just cropped. So you're not getting as good of resolution, but we're still getting the image here. Now, why would you want to do that? I'll show you exactly why you want to do that. Sometimes you want to slow things down. So at 60 frames per second, that lets you cut it in half. Let's say if I'm recording it or doing a video that's 24 frames per second, and then you can get this really smooth motion. Pretty neat, huh? Okay, now I want to try and demonstrate the IBIS. Now, the internal stabilization that the camera comes with. Remember, it's got 5 axes of stabilization on the sensor. I use it a lot in the video. A lot of the video that you're going to be seeing in this is going to be using that anyway, but I wanted to use it now just so that I can clearly point out when I'm using it and when I'm not, or when I'm using it. So I'm going to attach the 35mm lens because that comes from Sony, and well, the Sony lenses seem to work best with this particular feature, and I will show you how well this stabilization works. As you can see, nice and smooth. Well, yeah, smooth. Maybe not quite like using a gimbal or a stabilizer, but smooth nonetheless. Who would have thought? Without any sort of gimbal thing. Smooth. Well, yeah. You'll have to let me know what you think. Was it smooth? Was it not? I think it was pretty smooth.
All right, the sun's not up and it's already time to catch a flight. I've been in many airports around the world, and I can honestly say Salt Lake has a nice one. Look at the other weary travelers headed toward their respective gates. Here is some interesting art, perhaps inspired by a rubber band ball. I'm not taking a jab at the art. It really does look nice here. I mentioned it was early, so I'm cracking open some liquid energy to help get through the first leg of the journey. The sun is up, and there's our ride, at least the one that will take us to Denver to catch the next plane. I've always wondered who the face belonged to on Alaskan Airlines. Turns out it's based on an elderly Eskimo man who used to greet passengers on Arctic tours. Thank you, AI, for providing that information. I blame you if it is not accurate. Well, we're on our way to Denver. There's some amazing landscape between here and there. I've actually been there and taken photos when temperatures were warmer. Looks nice on film, doesn't it? But we're not here to talk about film cameras. Time to land in Denver. This airport is busy, but it's not quite as nice as its counterpart in Salt Lake City. Not that it's horrible or anything, it just needs a bit of a refresh. Leftover snacks from the last flight. And now we're on the next bird, this time heading to JFK Airport in New York City. We started this journey early in the morning, now it's evening in New York, and the longest flight awaits us here. I feel like we're gradually descending levels on the niceness of the airports. JFK is in serious need of a refresh. Maybe there's a nicer terminal somewhere. I don't know. I'm starting to get tired here, so let's just jump to being on the ground in Paris. This could be any airport baggage claim in any city around the world, but we know it's Paris by the free magazines that tell us so. Now we're officially in Europe, driving in a rental car, heading to interesting places sure to provide good photo opportunities. If you're into history, you may have heard of this Belgian town. This was the site of the Battle of Mons in the First World War. In 1914, the British were forced out by the Germans, and it remained under German occupation until it was reclaimed by the Canadians in the last days of the war. It is certainly a photogenic city. Indeed, I love Mons. Now, We drive through a frozen forest to the town of Villers-Cotterets in France. This little town was home to the Black Count, General Thomas Alexander Dumas, and his famous son, the author Alexander Dumas. You probably know some of his books, like The Count of Monte Cristo. It's a pretty little town, and is also the place where French was declared the official language of France, as opposed to Latin or some of those other dialects that they speak over there. Between Villers-Cotterets and the next town, there is a bit of a World War I history site. During the war, General Mangin had a tower built here so he could better observe the battlefield. From the replica tower here, we can stare out over the former battle lines. How's the camera doing, by the way? The next stop is in Pierrefonds, France. This place is right out of a storybook, complete with an amazing castle that sits just above the town. It's a bit foggy, but a visit to the castle should still provide some interesting photos. It's a small town, so you can walk to the castle fairly easily. Just don't get run over in the small town traffic. And here it is, looking a bit mysterious in the fog. This is a nice view of the town. The fog makes for a nice, moody photo. Speaking of moody, this place seems to have a bad mood about it in the fog, but I'm not passing on the opportunity to visit a real-life castle. I love the looks of the place, but again, the fog gives it a sort of an eerie feel. This corridor will make for an interesting photo. My wife didn't disappear, I just jumped ahead of her to take the photo. Next, we're heading into another Belgium city well known for its World War I history. To this day, every night at 8 p.m., the last post ceremony takes place at the Menin Gate in Ypres to honor the fallen of World War I. There's a lot more than World War I history here, as the city is quite old, even predating Roman presence in the area. The main square is home to a lot of really neat-looking historic buildings, like the Cloth Hall. Textiles have played an important role in Ypres' past, as you may have guessed by the name. There are also some incredible churches here that feature a lot of architectural elements famous from the Middle Ages. Outside of town, we're visiting the front lines of World War I, specifically Hill 60. This area was held by the Germans for most of the war. It was briefly taken by the Allies in 1917 after exploding a number of mines, but the Germans immediately came back to retake it. Next, we're in Kassel, France. This is a beautiful little town with a windmill. Just climb the hill above the town and there it is, along with some views and a statue honoring a World War I general. The French countryside can be quite beautiful, especially in this sort of lighting. All right, I've got some caffeine and I'm ready to start the journey back. I'm going to be starting in Paris, but this part of the trip will be going through quite a few airports. It's a busy day for travel, so I'm not alone on this journey. Just check out this bus ride. People are already lining up. Time to get on this bird that's going to Vegas. And here we are, Vegas. There's a sign, I guess for those like me who aren't leaving the airport. Slot machines too, just in case you didn't get your fill out there on the strip. Well, I've got to get to another terminal, so here we go. Nice lighting. those taxis lined up. You can see the strip too. I have to take a train to get to the actual gates.
Terminal 1 baggage claim for American and Delta Airlines.
This train is going to the D gate. Please hold on to a post for entry.
Vegas sign. All these slot machines, but I'm not a gambler. Last flight of this trip, and then we're home. Goodbye, Las Vegas. And just like that, we're back on the ground in Salt Lake City. It's much busier here than it was in Vegas. Must be the winter sports crowd. Oh, man. Well, what'd you think of the camera? How did it do on our little trip there to Europe? I think it did pretty good. The photos are pretty good. Any limitations there are probably going to be from the lens that I chose to take with me. I took some other lenses, but those were for the, I had the 35mm lens that I brought along just in case I found myself in a situation where I couldn't use the gimbal, and it plays a little bit nicer with the IBIS, the internal stabilization, so I had it for that purpose. You know, sometimes you go into the museum and they're like, "Are you a journalist because you have this camera?" I'm like, no, we don't believe you and want you to fill out paperwork. So if I take this bigger lens off and put a smaller lens, they usually are somewhat satisfied. They really don't like the gimbal. But anyway, it did pretty good. I mean, these are photos that you can blow up to poster size, and they're still going to look nice because of the lens and everything. Beautiful photos, beautiful, wonderful camera. Very versatile, has all kinds of features built in. I mean, but you guys will have to let me know what you think. Were the photos any good? Don't judge them based on the composition, all of that. But the performance of the camera itself, not the cameraman, but the camera itself. Did it do pretty good? How about the video? Almost all of the video in this video was recorded with the A7 IV, which I am actually recording on right now. And it seems to do a fantastic job. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. As for me, right now, I have been on the road long enough. I am going to go home and get some rest. So I'll see you guys in the next one.
ไปพะวงหลงเฝ้าสาวเจ้าบางประกงพางวยงงหลงเกิน